Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Higher Self Dialogues, an episode in which I get really personal, telling you more about what's going on with me and my higher self. It's a big part of this podcast. As you may know, I've been delving into the topic of higher self struggles to really emphasize that, yes, the struggle is real, people. And I can tell you that from the fact of my own struggle. You know, when people talk or share insights about the higher self, things tend to just gravitate towards being about the joy and the light that's found in this particular area of spirituality, of one's being and life. But it's often a conversation that's had at the expense of talking about the struggle, which, if I'm honest, is probably going to be the largest part of the experience for most people of journeying to the higher self with the higher self, at least the real, true, gritty journey that it is, not the make-believe one that is actually, to be honest, just spiritual bypassing, perhaps mixed up with self-delusion and this kind of innate bias that we have towards the light and the joy. True integration includes the shadow. That is, of course, another story. But the point is that whilst the higher self journey is one that is deeply light-filled and full of joy and ecstasy, and I will get to all of that, what's missing is dealing with the other side of that coin, which is the struggle. And crucially, and this is the whole point about talking about struggles, is how to deal with struggle so that it too can be seen as the story of love and light that it ultimately is. At least that's how I see it, that's how I approach it, that the struggle is a story also of love and light, just in a different form. So please get comfortable and welcome into my personal life and journey with me, your host, Anton Jarrod, on the Higher Self Dialogues. Yeah, in today's episode, I want to dive into something that's been very present for me lately. Even though the situation in question happened, some time ago, but not that long ago, but it's kind of come up in one form or another throughout my entire journey, right through since the beginning, since childhood. And this feeling, this thing that I'm going to describe is enough of a feature for me to go, you know what, this is what the journey is like. It's not just academic, it's not just what you read in books, this is what happens. And it happens when you least expect it, when you can't predict it. And that is the situation of feeling and sensing that your higher self has abandoned you, has written you off, that you have failed in some way, and now it's all over. The journey has come to an end. And it's one of the many forms of that classic dark night experience that is just a part of the journey of transformation. So what form does it take generally? Well, you're navigating typically a difficult situation in your life, and you're maybe struggling between achieving your idea or your ideal, your moral ideal, and how you're actually being. And there is this potentially, or there's some kind of crisis of conscience somewhere in there, typically. And this goes well beyond the ordinary feeling of psychological guilt, but it can include that along with other emotional states for sure. But there's the deeper feeling. And the deeper feeling is that somehow you've betrayed your own spirit, the divine aspect of yourself. And the spiritual experience of this through intuition, whether you're claircognizant or clairaudient or clairvoyant or some mix of all of these, the intuitive experience is one of separation, that your higher self, however your higher self speaks to you, is telling you that you failed, that they are leaving, that it's all over. And no one else but you can really understand exactly what seems to have gone wrong, because it's this internal experience. It's on paper, it might not seem like anything has gone wrong to anyone else, but gone wrong it has. And now all the cards seem to point to this fact, this truth of the situation. You have got to go. You've not made the cut. You've failed to meet the standard. Your higher self is letting you go. You're fired, basically. And yeah, this can take many forms. It's highly individual and specific to the journey, the archetypes, the history of your specific connection to your higher self so far. But whatever its form, it's painful and it's uneasy. Now, when this happens, when you're starting on that journey of exploring your own spiritual connection, or perhaps even consciously trying to make that first connection with your higher self, early on in that journey, when this happens, it feels absolutely catastrophic. And for you, inside, it's like the world is ending. That's how it feels. But you don't realize it at the time, but you will grow out of that. And it's much like the case of when a toddler, when the toys are taken away, they scream and they feel like, oh my God, this is awful, it's so painful. But the toddler grows out of feeling like the toy being taken away is the end of the world, that it's absolutely horrible. With maturity, then this experience of loss and separation comes with a certain amount of subtlety and eventually a different kind of authenticity. The separation feels real. It is experienced as real, but in a new way, in a more honest and genuine, mature way. It's equally devastating. It's horrible, but it's in a more refined way. And yeah, the pain is still there, but it's felt in a more holistic kind of context. I'll by the end of this podcast session, by the end of this episode, hopefully you will get to understand a little bit more about what I mean by that. So the first kind of question in all of this is, well, does the higher self really abandon you? Is this sense of disconnection, this felt absence, really real? Is it even possible for the higher self to step back, to reject you when you fall short? Or is something else going on actually beneath the surface? And well, I've got to tell you, I think that this is such a rich area to explore, because so many of us will have had these moments or will have them, whether it's in meditation or through a strong sense of intuition. We feel like we're no longer aligned, we're no longer in sync, that higher source of guidance and being is no longer connected. And it's really, really easy in those moments to spiral. But I want to peel that experience back a little and really look at what's happening when we feel that rupture. And I want to share what's recently gone on with me, because I think it just really speaks to this. So stay with me and we'll get right into this after this. Okay, so not so long ago, I woke up from a kind of dreamlike but conscious meditative space. I'm familiar with that. And from that space, I went straight into journaling. In this occasion, the actual details of the experience quickly escaped my conscious mind, and I wasn't really making any effort to remember the details. And I wasn't thinking at the time that I'd be sharing my journal entries with anyone else. And all that was left was this sense of abandonment, but it was a very clear, distinct sense. And in my journal, I wrote about how the experience as a whole seemed to create, and this is from my actual journal entry, I'll read it. The feeling that higher self was displeased with me, was leaving, was giving up on me. These are familiar things that have in the past caused a great deal of disturbance. But somehow they don't quite touch me in the way they did. I'm not really perturbed by them. I have to spend a moment to think about what I'm perceiving, but it just doesn't ring totally true. There is an element of possibility and reality in them, usually connected to my own sense of guilt for not having done something well or well enough, which makes me think it's plausible that higher self will abandon me. Those fears themselves are deep-rooted and connected to senses of shame and not being good enough, as always, but I feel that these are all just exploited in those intimations, and that, in truth, I can ignore them because there is nothing to worry about regarding any connection between me making mistakes and higher self leaving or disconnecting in consciousness. When I think about it, I can't believe how ridiculous a notion it is and how much credence I've given it in the past. That's what I wrote. That's actually a recent entry. When I read it back now, I realize both how much I've given these feelings credence in the past, but also how far I've traveled in relating to these experiences in a different way. And there's been many and even more direct experiences of feeling separation and having this conscious interaction with higher self where there is this experience of abandonment. Perhaps I'll get to share that another time, where that feeling of separation, it just feels so visceral, where the memory and day consciousness of the experience is so clear and present. And there's some very challenging forms of abandonment to deal with. Maybe you've experienced some of those yourself. But yeah, it's interesting, in this entry, I'm kind of like, there's an element of possibility, of reality in them. I'm like, yeah, because I'm tuning into that. Geez, this could be real finally. Like, this could actually be happening now because of everything. Like, we've been through this whole journey, but now it's like, so my head, my mind and my feelings are like going, oh, yeah, this is actually real. But then in another way, I'm going, but hold on a minute, maybe, no, if I tune into something deeper here, then I can't believe how this is like a ridiculous notion. So there you go. There's that sense of being torn and this kind of dance going on. Earlier on in the journey, there would be no dance because I had no experience that it would be all okay. So that first experience of being abandoned is like absolutely terrible because it's so real, it's so serious, and yeah, it takes the form of being permanent and it's horrifying. But the experience of connection then kind of helps you come around a bit, like, oh, okay, it's phew, I got through that one, and then it happens again, and so on and so on. And this is the journey, the push and pull between the higher and lower self. So yeah, that's kind of the spiritual experience, or a little bit of it. But you might be asking reasonably, what's going on in your daily life and situation that might provide a kind of practical world explanation for what's going on here in the psycho-spiritual domain? And the answer here is a lot. I have been going through a lot. In the briefest nutshell, I would say I've been going through a certain amount of grief of different kinds. My mother died in January, a few months ago. I'm dealing with and navigating myself through a difficult caring illness situation at home. I'm dealing with a very difficult, painful, traumatic breakup, which has really challenged my core and really made me ask and answer a lot of questions about myself and everything. Very, very difficult. And then in the area of personal and spiritual development, I've been really grappling with new forms of trying to consciously balance and integrate inner polarities, the positive and negative in all its forms within me. The form of self and other, of caring for self and caring for other. And it kind of touches everything, the sort of the landscape of polarity. So all of this going on creates a really, really heady psychological, mental, emotional, spiritual mashup where, when you add to that deep spiritual dynamics and experiences of higher self interacting and intuition and spiritual experience, well, it gets quite difficult, a difficult terrain to navigate. In addition to which, you're dealing with all the other ordinary things of daily life, bills, food, work, cost of living, debts. It's a lot. And then, of course, also dealing with what's going on in the world and, what's happening and, the whole kind of world picture. It's like, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I'm sure some of you can really relate to that. And in all of this, what my journaling experience shows is ultimately some part of me feels, some deeper part of me, or the whole of me feels off par, out of sync, and enough to cause a deep spiritual rupture that manifests as higher and lower self separation. And it's not just symbolic, it's something that's happening in spirit, right? Well, or is it? And this is where it gets tricky because sometimes what you sense in the meditative space is just your own psychological residue, remnants of emotional and mental experiences that have been happening, that's been unconscious, and that you're now only becoming conscious of. But who knows when or what exactly these experiences are remnants of? I mean, the lower self just can't be definitive here. Sometimes it can be, remnants of stuff that happened long ago in your earlier life. Sometimes it can be remnants of stuff that happened in previous lives. And sometimes it can be, what happened yesterday or this morning. Yeah, it's really tricky to be definitive. Sometimes what you're experiencing can be an encounter with genuinely external spiritual energies that are taking, form that's in harmony with what you're currently vibrating at. And of course, at other times, it can be your own higher self expressing itself through the body of intuition directly to you, the lower self, where you're being conscious of this expression at the time. It can get really tricky and complicated, depending on how you look at it. I mean, in a way, all of it is your higher self, really. But let me know if you have any questions about any of that, and I'll deal with it in a future episode. But with my philosopher hat on, the ontology of spiritual experience is something about which much can be said. But I digress. Let me get back to the point here. The point is, whatever the underlying experience was or is that gives rise to that sense of inner separation, which is somehow being mirrored in meditation or in your psycho-spiritual experience or just through your feeling, whatever it is for you, however it might express itself, depending on what spiritual experience looks like for you, the most important thing is not the feeling of abandonment, or whether that's real or not, or the belief or sense that it's so, and all the possible consequences of that for your life and future, because yes, your mind can go there, but the mirror and reflection itself, the thing being reflected. And for me, in this particular episode, the thing being reflected was a failure in polarity. That's what I really tuned into. And that's been a constant theme in my own journey. It comes up in various forms. You will have things that come up for you all the time, a kind of perennial, constant theme of your spiritual life. And in this scenario, I think the main current was that I had either not totally integrated the positive polarity within me or the negative polarity successfully enough. I hadn't achieved balance, and it was this that caused separation and abandonment. This was the kind of the raison d'etre of higher self expressing separation. And it was disturbing to me because I was in total disagreement with my higher self. I was like, no, I'm actively working on balance and harmony of polarity in my daily life. I come to a point of completion and realization of this. So higher self to be saying that I've failed in this area, there must be something wrong. It must be a deception, or this can't be real. But oh God, what if it is real? I need to rethink everything, maybe. And yeah, here we go. That whole kind of spiral can start. This experience, maybe this is real. Because then you think, okay, this experience of doubt, maybe the doubt is the negative experience. Maybe I'm kind of picking up some negative energies here that aren't mine, that are kind of trying to destabilize me. And then, whoa, you start going down this kind of very difficult path that can be hard to climb back from. So this feeling that I kind of started the day with caused a certain amount of waves in the day that followed. Yeah, I can tell you, despite my first feelings, as I wrote in that journal entry, that, you know what, I can just ignore the sentiments here that I became aware of, that, no, this is going to be fine. Well, no, it wasn't. However, it was only during the following day when I had this different experience that I, or my mind, was able to fully make sense of and contextualize this whole experience of apparent separation and abandonment. Because the following day, I then had this deep experience of presence, of consciously letting go and sitting in a state of being that was beyond polarity, and one in which both the polarities were present, the positive and the negative, in all of my experiences as I could see it, distinct but as one. And it was then that the spiritual experience of abandonment, I kind of realized that that was a catalyst for the spiritual experience of integration and wholeness. What was going on here was a kind of dialectic playing out in time and space. Yeah, so the first part was my own prior sense of wholeness. I was, in the previous days, I was balancing everything. I was achieving everything. I was winning my own spiritual journey. I hadn't done anything wrong. I'm not doing anything that would lead to a deeper spiritual gulf and a higher self abandonment. But then there was the antithesis of this. My higher self was speaking to me about the opposite of this, the ways in which I was failing, that I wasn't doing what I thought I was doing, that the ego thought it was doing, which I couldn't see or admit in myself or through my ordinary mind. And so when I had that experience of higher self intuiting to me that there was this separation, that I had failed, that I wasn't actually balancing, I then had to struggle to balance the two things together, because they both can't be true, can they? Surely not. And then this inner resolution happened through an intuitive sense of letting go and embracing the duality that led me to realize and experience that actually, both things were true in their own way. I had to own both the ways in which my actions and behaviors were manifesting separation and unity at the same time, negative and positive. And once I did that, the synthesis occurred. And I could see that, yeah, in ways, my previous understanding that I wasn't doing anything wrong, that I was achieving integration and balancing, that there were ways in which that wasn't true. At the same time, there were ways in which it was true. And this new kind of insight helped me integrate all of that. So there you go. That was a kind of like little mini journey that I went on not so long ago, where this experience and sense of abandonment was both real and unreal at the same time. Now, I've been on a long journey of a long history of exploring this and experiencing this in one way or another with my higher self. Maybe you have with yours. Maybe you're going through something right now where you're going through a spiritual experience of feeling separated and lost from yourself. That, yeah, what is it telling you? What is it encouraging you to look at? The state of presence that ensued my experience allowed me to truly and deeply connect and reconnect with the truth that I already knew, but which I'd forgotten and lost in the time of genuinely feeling like I was abandoning myself or being abandoned. And that is that the higher self cannot be separated from the lower self. It's not possible. The separation or the experience and impression of abandonment is just a tool. It's a teaching instrument. It's a teaching device, a catalyst for integration and change. And it's both real and not real. If it wasn't real, so it has to be real, otherwise it can't be a catalyst and change can't happen. So, this dance, this pattern, it plays out in so many different ways as, it's the higher and lower self dance. They dance with each other. They evolve and build and grow the living connection through these experiences of push and pull, of separating and uniting. And each time the separation feels real, and it is real, just as each time the union is real, the connection is real. The experience of separation and abandonment is sometimes a necessary one. Sometimes it's the only way that you as the lower self can integrate, can fully own, as they say, your stuff, to fully connect. That is the kind of ultimate purpose of the experience of separation and apparent abandonment from your higher self. It cannot happen. It cannot happen. Thank you for joining me as I explore this deeply personal stuff. Let me know if you have any questions or if there's something that's unclear. But likewise, tell me about your own journeys of feeling abandoned by your higher self or soul or spirit or God or the absolute or just divine in the world that you feel or sense, whatever your experience is. What happened for you? I really want to know. I'd love for you to share it with me, and I can talk about it in a future episode. Let me know. In the next episodes, I'm going to be unpacking further this question of struggle on the journey to the higher self. What is the blindfold? How is it taken off? There's a lot of layers to this, to all of those questions introduced in the previous episodes. So please do join me next time on the Higher Self Dialogues.